Okay, so now we've gone through and you've planned out your project and you've made sure that everything was supposed to do what it was supposed to do. You've had your work breakdown structures, remember, my favorite document. You know, you've had all your networks and all that sort of put together. Now we get to the fun part about, well, how does the project end and what needs to take place? Okay, so the first thing to bear in mind is that very few projects are going to be entirely successful. Okay, so don't expect perfection. Don't expect perfect. Okay, so the reality is there's always going to be something that went wrong. There's going to be bits that didn't work. There's going to be things that didn't do what you thought they were going to do. So, you know, you're just going to have to deal with that because almost every project encounters things like planning flaws. Okay, where your planning was a little bit out. You know, unknown risks, which you probably found out the hard way. You know, things like that. There were changes. Someone wanted something different all of a sudden that, you know, your sponsor decides they need to change things 2 weeks early because the competitor did something different. Okay, so there's a whole lot of reason things are going to change. So don't expect it to be perfect. That's not the job of the project manager to get everything perfect. The job of the project manager, or the aim of project management, is to come in below budget. So below budget, ahead of time. Okay, so below budget, ahead of time, having met all quality standards. Okay, so that's the perfect aim, is to be below the budget, get it done ahead of time, and make sure that you hit all the quality standards that you said you were going to. So you're going to get to the end of the project, and the reason you're going to get to the end of the project is because the organization no longer needs it. So, you know, you're out there, you're doing something for a time, it could have been an initiative, that's now finished. Other reasons the project might end might, you know, the lack of sponsor support. So you might be doing the project and things might cut off ahead of time because, you know, the sponsor changed their mind and didn't necessarily need to keep on going, or something else came up. Problems of motivation or the ability of the project team. Okay, so the project team might have, you know, run out of the ability to keep on going, or there might have been key changes just making it unviable. You know, changes in the team members, as well as obviously it came to the end. You know, it could be just the end, no longer, you know, viable, or no longer needed, or no longer required. There could be also, you know, a whole range of things crop up. The resources might be needed somewhere else. You know, the initial planning assumptions were inaccurate. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why we could end it early. You know, and realization there's a better way of managing activity. You know, new information comes up all the time, and none of those things necessarily mean you failed. It just means that at the end of the day, you know, a lot of things can occur to bring the project to a close ahead of time, or that it's going to close off at a due date anyway. Eventually your project will come to an end. All right, so all of those things, even those things that I mentioned, you know, change of people, change of staff, requirement changes in the organization, all of those things are still amazing learning and worth cataloging, because what's going to happen is you want to collect that information because, you know, you want to keep that on board for next time, so that when you go to do a project in the future, you start to see, well, hey, what happened last time, and it gives you good information. All right then, now that we know that it's done, we do our financial check. Okay, so we do our final check of our financials. We make sure we prepare the summaries of all the, you know, all the activities up to date. Okay, so make sure that, you know, anything that we've done has been recorded. The costs have come in, the audit checks and the final audit has been conducted. You know, the various paperwork provided to the people that need to get it. So to your accountant or to whoever's, you know, holding those financials. So all the receipts, all the payments, all those records go in, collated, copied and put out there. Make sure you put a status report on any unfinished activities or unstarted activities where financial commitment's involved. So if you've put a deposit down for something but you haven't done the activity, make sure that someone knows where that deposit is so you can go get it back if you need to. Or if you've still got things that are being resolved and there's still bills coming through, make sure that that's known, okay? So that no one later, you know, 6 months later, someone doesn't get a bill and go, what's this for? And then there's no money to pay it, which creates problems. So anything not resolved, make sure it's detailed. Anything still outstanding that you have to collect, payments or anything like that, make sure that's detailed as well, because they can come up sometime after the project ends. The next thing I need to do is, if I've had a bunch of staff, I need to staff reassign. Okay, so if I've borrowed staff from another area in the organisation, I'm probably going to need to give them back. But before I do that, I need to make sure that I notify all the stakeholders that the activity has now ended and any ongoing effects that are there. So all my stakeholders need to know, yep, we've finished now, that's what's happening. We can cancel off any purchasing commitments, contracts or informal agreements we might have. So anything out there, you know, if we've borrowed people or are lending people or have, you know, borrowed a resource, make sure that that gets returned. Make sure that we dispose of any, you know, leftover products or sale of any residual material or equipment. So if we bought that car that I mentioned earlier, okay, maybe they sell that off to get back in all the funds they need. So, you know, we're just left with nothing. All we should be left with at the end from that project might just be paper, okay? I need to think about also any legal issues, so any contracts that might be out there, I need to make sure that they've all been finished on time and that we're not, you know, cutting anything off early. If we are cutting things off early, make sure that comes back. So, you know, I need to think about my legal. Okay, so make sure that any of my contracts have been finalised. If there's any insurance claims that I need to think about that might still be out there for any loss or damage, I need to make sure that's been resolved. Workplace health and safety. Particularly if I'm giving staff back to someone else, I might need to give a workplace health and safety file with them, particularly if there's been any incidents or problems, okay? Any rehabilitation issues. So if anyone was working on the project and they got injured, there's likely to be a long residual chain of activity that has to go on after that. So I need to make sure their managers, you know, get appraised of that information. Any regulatory bodies that need to know what we're doing, we need to make sure that we let them know that we're finished. They might have to come and have a look at our place. Depending on what we've been doing, particularly if we're in, you know, construction, if we've had stuff all over a street and we're saying we're finished, you know, we need them to come out and inspect it and make sure that we get the sign off. Okay, so we're really making sure everybody knows. I need to make sure I, you know, cover any security options. Okay, so when I'm starting to hand things back, any site, any equipment, any material, to make sure that that's all secure. If I need to put up cautionary signage, you know, if I'm, you know, putting a whole bunch of dangerous goods, spare bricks or whatever it happens to be, we've been building a house, we've got building materials, make sure there's clear signs, make sure that's secured so that it doesn't get stolen. Dispose safely of any unwanted documentation. So if there's any bits and pieces around that we don't need, make sure they're disposed of safely. And I need to think about, you know, if I do have any information that we've been going, any plans or any documents that we no longer require, just to make sure that we think about any privacy concerns so we don't just start sticking things places. Once all that's done and once we've considered all those different things, we need to make sure that we prepare a professional end of project report. Okay, because what we need to do is when we're saying we're completing it, we need to give that to the stakeholders and let them know what's been completed, what's still outstanding, what the end state was, any necessary publicity, in-house journals, trade magazines, newspapers, community notices, whatever it is, you know, hooray, we're finished doing the activity, and make sure that we report on any opportunities for the future. All right, so that's just going to give us a good position to start closing off, all right? Make sure this is all communicated to who it needs to be communicated to. We're not just like, yep, it's Friday afternoon, thank you very much, we're finished. We collect all that data, we make sure our staff know where they're supposed to go at the end, what day they're finishing. We've tied off all our legal requirements. We've made sure that we've put proper security in place. All our financials are up to date, you know, and we've thought about those things. Okay, so as we conclude the project, usually what that means is, as I said, we started to get to the bottom of it. We need to do the report, you know, so we can close it off and conclude the project. All right, so larger projects will usually involve having some sort of final report. You know, like if it's a small project, it might be a high five, thanks very much, we go down the pub, have a few drinks, job done. But as far as thinking about a large activity, there's going to be a lot of different stakeholders involved, and so I need to make sure that I'm informing the team, informing those stakeholders. So I need to think about notifying them of a few key points. And the first one is that the project is over. Closed. Okay, project is now closed, activity has now been finished, all activities are completed. All right, we need to outline any outcomes met. So we tell them exactly what we've delivered, you know, outcomes met, deliverables. Okay, so how much of what, by when, by who, you know, did we finish the project? What was finished? What did we achieve? what was done, what time frame was it done in, how much did it end up costing, all that information that we had there. We also let them know of any residual issues. Okay, so do we have any additional resources, any leftover supplies, anything still coming along, any payments outstanding, all that sort of stuff there. Okay, they'll need to know that. So where are the resources that we had? Confirmation of financials. So once again, making sure that we've got the financial statements there so they know exactly how much was spent, and make sure that that's all been delivered to the project sponsors and all the other different stakeholders where required. So there's financial statements. The other thing we need to do is confirmation all contracts are finished. So if we've signed up for any contracts or anything like that, that those have been terminated and there's no ongoing legal obligation, all right? So anything that we had a loan for, an agreement for, that's now all ceased and there's no ongoing liability in that regard. And then just a final statement. And the final statement is just outlining that all the relevant project documents have been properly filed away. We've got copies of all those sort of things and information has been secured. So anything that we need to keep, there are, things that we need to record for a period of time. You might have workplace health and safety inspection reports. You might have, particularly for dangerous materials, you've had that. You might have a statute time that you need to keep information for. If you've got payroll records, those sort of things, financials, you might need to keep for 7 years. Okay, so to make sure that, your final statement lets them know that all these things have been kept appropriately. And that should be your final report for closure. Okay, let them know it's closed, let them know what outcomes we met, let them know if there's anything still outstanding, confirmation of any financials to make sure that, yep, here's exactly what we spent and what funding was left over or anything like that. Confirmation that all the contracts and anything we're responsible for have now been ceased or finalised, and just your final statement saying that all your records have been kept correctly and stored and secured in an appropriate manner for an appropriate period of time, so that if ever it needs to get reopened and people need to check what happened, they can quickly go back and find all the project reports and all the different records, particularly things like financials, which you have to keep for a period of time. All right, make sure all that information is there, keep it secure, share it around, and you're good to go.